Oh. I lost the verse. I had something on my mind. This verse is a little bit macabre. It's a little bit Christian for my taste also, at least on the surface. It's got kind of a fear-based religion, don't go to hell type thing going on, which is not usually my cup of tea. But I thought of it, and it's a verse in the Gita. Trividham narkasyedam dwaram nashanam atmana. Trividham. There are three types. Narakasya dvaram. There are three types of gates to hell. Narak means hell, and Narakasya means of hell, and Dvara means door or gates. There are three doors to hell. Nashanam Atmana, that destroy the self. There are three doors to hell which destroy the self. Kama, Krodha, Tatas, Lobha. And it names the three things. Kam is lust. Krodh is anger. And Lobh is greed. And then Tasmat etat trayam tyajit. Therefore, one must give up these three. One should give up these three. So, Trividham narkasyedam dwaram nashanam atmana. There are three gates to hell that destroy the self. Kama, Krodhas, Tata, Lobhas, lust, anger, and greed. And then Tasmat etat trayam tyajit, and therefore one must give these up. That's the verse. Trividham narkasyedam dwaram nashanam atmana. This is really killing me. I got an unsteady table, a new book that doesn't work, a wonky mic. You guys got to start bringing your A game here. We need some improvements. Trividham narkasyedam dwaram nashanam atmana kama krodhas tata lobhas tasmat etat trayam tyajit. There are three doors to hell that destroy the self: lust, anger, and greed. One must give these up. You see why I said it sounds kind of Christian? It's got that, hellfire and brimstone, the style of sermon that was popular. I can't remember who it was. It was like the Puritans or the Quakers. There was a big preacher, maybe 150, 200 years ago, and he was famous for these hellfire and brimstone speeches. I think brimstone is sulfur. I think brimstone, yeah? So brimstone is an archaic name for sulfur. So hellfire and brimstone is, this these kind of lectures that were popular, they've always been popular. Like, it's very demagogic, pandering to people's biggest fears, and you're talking about you got one lifetime and you better repent, otherwise some terrible thing is going to happen to you. That style of ministering to people and teaching people and encouraging people always, has always been popular in certain circles. Fear is a huge motivator. If you look at advertising before they made rules against this, in countries where they don't have these rules, you'll see sometimes they'll put skulls and crossbones in the ice cubes. So like an alcohol commercial, you'll have subtly drawn skulls and crossbones in the ice cubes. Or you'll see sometimes almost like a Grim Reaper type figure, like a United Colors of Benetton ad with a bunch of like ethnically ambiguous people, walking across the street, and then you'll see almost like an abstract Grim Reaper type figure. It's the shadow, but they've edited the shadow to make it look a little bit like a Grim Reaper with a sickle and a hood, stuff like that. Sex is the other big motivator. You'll see somebody like you'll see phallic symbols and stuff like that. Silhouettes of naked bodies and things like that. It's all over advertising. The further back you go in time for advertising, the worse it gets. And when you go to countries where they don't have laws against this kind of subliminal advertising, it's all the rage. And it was so bad in the 40s that they would it'd show you a movie, and then at various times in the movie they would just splice a single still frame of popcorn or soda. So you'd be watching a movie and it would just be an actual frame of popcorn. But it's moving so many frames per second. But it's like you slow it down, you actually see it's just straight up popcorn. So they're trying to subliminally program you to think, oh, I should go get some popcorn right now. I don't know why. I feel like I need to go get popcorn. That all got outlawed. Then it got more sophisticated, more abstract scenes. And then that got outlawed, and now they got to go, so abstract that it's tough to prove to a judge what they're doing. Were you guys aware of this? How many of you are aware of this kind of stuff? Yeah, it's like a real thing. You can Google it. And not like on some QAnon site or something like that. Like mainstream, you'll find, like normal Wikipedia entries about it. There's laws about it. It's in the legal codes, stuff like that. The reason why they have phallic symbols, or what's the female equivalent of a phallic symbol? Fertility symbol, but that's a little too ambiguous and euphemistic. What's the term? You guys know? Huh? Well, womb is just another name for that part of the body. Anyway, there must be some name. Obviously, I could come up with, say, a vaginal symbol, but that just doesn't sound as cool as phallic symbol. I could say there must be a particular. Huh? I mean, that's Sanskrit for womb, so that doesn't work. It's just you just picked another language, So there's a reason why symbols of sex organs or people engaging in sex or the naked form is used in advertising. And it's the same reason that skulls and crossbones and Grim Reapers are used in advertising. And that is that when you see a box of cereal or a Coca-Cola ad, and there's skulls and crossbones in the ice cubes or something like that, it freaks you out. And fear and desire light up the same primitive parts of the brain, the amygdala. They light up the same really kind of fundamental features of our brain. and they motivate you to act. And so this is one of the reasons why you take a girl on a date to a horror movie, or people go out and they do thrill-seeking things and they get lusty, and it's almost like an aphrodisiac. Because your body, your mind reacts to and your body responds to fear and desire in very, very similar ways. So there's skulls and crossbows, which would repulse you. But what it does is it excites you. It might excite you with attraction, or it might excite you with repulsion. But regardless, it excites you the same way, and then you want to act. And if you see a box of cereal on a billboard with the right subliminal messaging, and you want to react because you're freaked out, then you think, I want to react. But then there's a box of cereal. So how do you react? How do you interact with a box of cereal? If you're like, I see a box of cereal and I got to get out of here. I got to freak out. I got to do something. What do you think you got to do? You got to go buy the box of cereal. You get it? So whether it's like a lust scene and you get kind of like, you feel some stirring in your loins as a result of seeing the box of cereal, which is just totally bizarre, or whether you're freaked out and repulsed by seeing the box of cereal, the end result is the same. You want to interact with it. You want to act. And then you act in a way which you are programmed is the appropriate way to interact with a car or a box of cereal or a brand of alcohol or whatever it might be that's being promoted. Wild, right? Sex and death are the biggest motivators ever. And, death is extreme, but the soft side of death is fear. If there's an imminent threat of death, it's almost like a survival mechanism that almost is outside of your even cognitive choice. You just react. That's why you can't go and save a drowning person. Get too close to them. Your kids come up to save you from drowning and you'll push them down and kill them with you. It's not even conscious. It's like breathing. It happens automatically. So it's an imminent enough threat will elicit that kind of an involuntary, almost spastic reaction. But even when you're looking at like a sub-death situation, if you generate fear in people, it's an incredibly powerful motivator. George Bush was actually pretty expert at this. I always thought Bush was just an awful speech giver until I read a book on speech giving written by a professional rhetorician, someone who persuades people for a living, and he analyzed Bush's speeches. And he made the point that, something had happened new around the aughts, the early aughts, something new was happening, which is that people would just have a TV in their kitchen or wherever, and it would just run all day long. And it would almost be like background noise. It didn't used to be like that. When I grew up, it wasn't like that. You would sit down to watch TV, and it was like it was an activity that you would do. But then you got these, like the kitchen TV, and the bathroom TV, and the TV became almost like a background noise type apparatus that was there, but you weren't really giving it your full attention. Anyway, the speech I was pointing out that George W. Bush, the second Bush, when he gave speeches, he would speak in half sentences, non sequitur sentences where they didn't make any sense. The sentences would actually be half form. Like wouldn't have a subject and a predicate necessarily. They were actually nonsensical from a grammatical point of view. But that worked to his favor because there's background noise going on, and he's giving his speech, and then he would just throw in words. patriotism, safety, security, the enemy. Words which really, really trend well with U.S. audiences. Freedom is another one. They really trend well. We are incredibly responsive as a nation to this kind of language. So now you're seeing a candidate, he's not making any sense, but you're not listening to him anyway because you're making dinner. But you keep hearing these words like freedom, security, safety, and you're like, okay, that's my guy. Because I'm all flipped out. And that's my guy, my freedom, safety, security guy. That's the guy. I'm going to vote for him. So this type of programming has a long history, and I think in many ways the hellfire and brimstone speeches, and even a lot of biblical language, was designed to cater to and stimulate human beings in this way by triggering their fear center and their fear of death. I find it repulsive and not in a way that motivates me to buy the item. I find it repulsive in a way that makes me want to just really keep that thing at arm's length. But such language is here in the Gita, at least at a glance. Prima facie, it seems like that's what the Gita is saying. Do you guys follow that? It was a long-winded critique of hellfire and brimstone, looking at modern day or not necessarily current, but in the recent past, advertising on television billboards, the biggest motivators, sex and death, how sub-death is fear. They both light up the amygdala in the same way. We have very similar responses to both things. People know this. That's why horror movies and thrill-seeking behavior are oftentimes aphrodisiacs. And when you get fearful, you want to act. And if you're not thinking too much about that fear reaction you're having, you end up just slipping right into that funnel and doing whatever they want you to do in the first place. And it takes some significant critical thinking skills and some time and some effort not to fall into these patterns of reaction. And this stuff isn't lost on religion. In many ways, they were the original purveyors of this stuff. And you find that in the real fear-mongering and, hell and eternal damnation and repent sinner, and it freaks people out. It works for people. Because we're not as sophisticated as we might portray. In many ways, we're just, two-legged animals. And so a lot of the same stuff affects us the same way it's going to affect any creature with a survival mechanism. I don't find it to be the most... I don't find such arguments to be the most valid or the most honestly persuasive long term. I think spiritual traditions and religions, people who want to talk about some kind of higher power, they have to do a better job ultimately if they want to catch thinking people and intrigue thinking people to experiment with whatever they're offering. I think that we have to do better and present something which is a little more systematic and deep, honestly, just deep, and less pandering to people's worst instincts and biggest fears. Can you hear me, Matt? Okay. All right. So, back to the verse, which I just memorized. That's what I was doing. As I was going through the verses, you guys, I was learning it myself. And so, Trividham narkasyedam dwaram atmana nashanam atmana. Trividham narkasyedam dwaram nashanam atmana. Kama krodha tata lobhas tasmate tat chayam tyajit. There are 3 doors to hell, and they destroy the self. They are lust, anger, and greed, and one must give them up. One must give them up. So, I was kind of thinking to talk about something else, but let's just go through the verse real quick and you'll see where I'm headed. Lust is a desire to possess and enjoy people. Greed is the same desire to possess and enjoy objects. They both have the same selfish, extremely narcissistic, hedonic core. I want to enjoy. My desire to enjoy is the most important thing. It supersedes my sense of duty, even my sense of integrity. And I'll do whatever it takes to acquire the thing or the person that I want to enjoy. And that's my ultimate ethic. Do you guys follow that? Lust and greed are, in this sense, the same basic urge. It's self-centered, it's narcissistic, it's exploitative, it's focused on enjoyment, and it's about you and what you want and what's going to make you feel good. And it leads you to objectify both people as well as things. Of course, things are objects, but it leads you to objectify people and see them as either A, things to be enjoyed, because they're objects that you actually like, you want to enjoy this particular object, a particular person, or alternatively, they are vehicles to get you the things you want to enjoy, and therefore they're still objectified because they become merely a means to an end, and the end is the thing you want to enjoy in your possession being enjoyed by you. Did you guys get it? Okay. Who suffers from lust and greed? Raise your hand. Okay. Who doesn't suffer from lust and greed? Raise your hand. Okay. We've got an honest room of people. That's good. Excellent. Excellent. I think it's natural to have self-interest. I think a certain degree of self-focus, and even we could say narcissistic tendencies, is required simply to make your way in the world. There has to be some concern for self-preservation. There has to be some, self-focused thought and activity. The problem is when your desire to enjoy passes a certain threshold and it becomes the primary motivator for your life, and it supersedes duty, and it supersedes all other values and ethics, and it becomes the foundation of your life. That's when you have a problem. That's when you don't have some narcissistic tendencies, but you become a narcissist. That's when you become an exploiter, a user. That destroys community. And it certainly destroys higher pursuits in life, because the things and the people you want to enjoy are enjoyed on a physical level, and therefore you are now riveted to your physical body, and that becomes the most important thing to you. Higher abstract ideas like virtue and freedom and honor and legacy and loyalty, those ideas go beyond just your body, and they become larger than you, and they become so powerful that people sometimes even sacrifice their lives in pursuit of those ideals. Did you guys follow that? Does it make sense? It is possible. Historically, there are almost, you could say, unlimited examples of people answering the call of duty. And that's actually a video game, which I've never played, but there you go. There are almost unlimited examples of people who gave their lives for some higher principle. Like for sure. You know, just because I know Krishnadas spent 12 years in a supermax prison. Was there stuff you were ready to die for in prison? How about somebody called you a punk? Would you die over somebody calling you a punk? Yeah, it's just what it is. There's certain rules. Nobody calls you a punk or the B word. Just barely caught myself there. If somebody calls you that, and you know you're a prisoner, you're a male prisoner, you're a convict, you're a respectable prisoner, you have the respect of your fellow inmates, and somebody calls you that, it's just, that's it. It's immediately a fight. And a fight in prison means potentially a fight to the death. You don't know who's going to jump in or what's going to happen. So it's a pretty extreme example, right? It's a pretty extreme example. Like, I don't think you feel that way on the street. Right? Somebody called you a punk on the street, you're like, you figure it out, you decide, right? You make a decision. Is that worth it? You also got the 3 strikes thing you got to worry about. So you got a bunch of stuff you got to worry about. But is that worth it? Am I going to get caught? Does he have a weapon? Can I win the fight? There's a bunch of like supersonic fast calculations that your brain makes. But in prison it wasn't that. It was just you had to move, you had to jump. Whether that's right or not is irrelevant. It's just a particularly gritty example of the phenomenon I'm talking about. Also, a grenade gets thrown on the ground, and then, you know, it's it, you're done. Your whole squad is done. There's a squad of you guys in that foxhole. Everybody's done for, because the grenade, the shrapnel is going to rip everybody apart. So one of the guys just jumps on the grenade. And it's just completely like, you know, he's just gone. Cut in half. But the other guys survived. Why? Because one of the guys, in just that 2 seconds, just thought, oh, and just jumped. Or, you know, you got Pompeii, Mount Vesuvius, which erupted and vaporized everybody, carbonized everybody. But you've got pictures like that. The mountain was like, it wasn't like it just like erupted and then everybody just vaporized like that. It didn't happen like that. There were some rumblings and some beginning stuff that happened. Some people wrote about and got away. It took place over days. But there's that famous picture it's a carbonized fossil of a woman kind of laying down holding her baby. And so her last moments of her life as it erupted, and there was this huge heat flash, and everything heated up to like 500, 600 degrees instantly and carbonized everybody. It might have been hotter than that. It might have been over 1,000 degrees. I can't remember. But, that would be an example of a woman just, giving her life to protect her child. And that was the last thing she did, futilely trying to comfort her child. Because they were both, turned to ashes. I'm not exactly sure how it worked, but they were turned to ashes, but then there was ash all over them. And then that ash got carbonized somehow and turned into a form, and that's how you get the fossil. You see examples like this. People, they decide, okay, no, there's something, it's so important. I'd be willing to give my life for this thing. We have that capacity. We don't merely have an amygdala and an undeveloped prefrontal cortex like most mammals. We have a massively developed prefrontal cortex, which gives us the ability to think very, very abstractly. Which of course means when you listen to words like security and freedom, half consciously on the TV set while you're making dinner, and then make your presidential selection based on that, in a lot of ways you're dumbing yourself down to being an animal. Because the very thing that makes you human is your ability to think critically and abstractly in a very, very deep and profound way about the nature of reality. Do you guys follow this? That's what makes you human. Animals have the fight or flight syndrome. What makes you a human is your ability to work through things and think about things and make principled decisions and think very abstractly and have a value system. Animals don't have a value system. They have instinct. They just do whatever their instinct tells them to do. That's why if you see one dog humping another dog in the park, you're like, maybe if you don't want them to do that, maybe you'll kick one dog off the other dog. But nobody considers it like a crime has been committed, some kind of major, breach of ethics has been committed. Because they're animals. They just operate based on instinct, and you understand that. You see a dog licking its genital, you kick it or something like that, but it's just you don't really think, hey, Fido, we have to have a talk about this, Your behavior isn't acceptable. You know what I mean? Yeah, you have some kind of sex addiction. I think you need to make some slaw meetings. You need a sponsor. Nobody does that. Why? Because the animal is just running on instinct. It's a huge tragedy when human beings live their lives running on instinct instead of living their lives based on principles. Because you've been given so much, and then you just throw it all away to behave like a dog, to behave like an animal. The more narcissistic you become, the more selfish and self-absorbed you become, and exploitative you become, and the more you try to enjoy people and things and make that your ultimate ethic, the more any philosophizing you do becomes hypocritical and just a sophisticated version of animal life that ultimately is very simple and very easy to understand. And no matter how highfalutin you speak, or what stilted tones you use, or how verbose you are, or how sophisticated you sound, how eloquent you are, and what a persuasive case you make, and how expert you are at rhetoric, ultimately, your position is reducible down to you're a selfish animal who just cares about satisfying your genitals. You follow that? You follow that, Drew? And so, regardless of how intelligent we are or how well-spoken we are, we need to learn to distinguish between higher principles and instincts masquerading as higher principles. And we should not go quietly into the night. We should take the time and the trouble to develop a set of values, and then we should spend the rest of our life living according to those values. And ultimately, in many ways, evolve beyond the idea of some kind of hell in the afterlife. And that's what motivates us to be good. We should see the hell in this life of dumbing yourself down and living an animalistic life. And we should refuse in the present day to sully ourselves. Not because of some promise of the afterlife. Not because of some threat of cosmic damnation. But because we see the hellishness of living a life of merely sense gratification in this world, and what a tragedy that is, and how beneath us that is. And we should understand this, and we should take strength from this. And anchor ourselves to this idea of living a life of virtue, of higher purpose, a life of integrity where we live up to our virtues because we took the trouble to figure out what our virtues are and what we stand for. And by doing that, you anchoring yourself to that, you are steeled against the inevitable winds and pushings of this body and this world to kind of want to sully you and knock you down and make you drink from the trough of materialism. You require a little bit of fortitude to avoid that. And that fortitude comes from these kind of discussions. And more specific versions of these kind of discussions where you actually figure out, who am I? What do I value? What do I stand for? What would I be willing to die for? And even more importantly, what am I willing to live for? And by having that in your mind and in your thoughts, when opportunities for degradation come your way, you'll be able to pass by the open windows and not just jump off your throne and lick the bone in front of you like a dog who's been called a king but is still just a dog. You put a dog on a throne, put a big crown on his head, and start calling him your excellency. When somebody throws a bone on the ground, the dog will jump off the throne and start licking the bone and show itself to be what it always was, a mutt, an animal. We shouldn't be that. We should take the trouble to develop a value system, and not a prison value system, something deeper. And then we should spend the rest of our lives living up to it. Striving to live up to it. And if you're going to fail, fail upwards. Get better each time, till eventually you can have some stability. That's a life worth living. We don't have to look for hell, fire, and brimstone down the road. The gates to hell are the gates when you start to go down these roads. You immediately start to experience a very, very hellish, circumscribed, attenuated, crippled life. The other one is crowed, anger. Anger is what happens when your lust and greed aren't fulfilled. And there's several ways your lust and greed don't get fulfilled. A, you don't get the girl. And then you get angry. Like when I teach, specifically when I teach young ladies, if it's girls, then it's their elder's job to make sure people don't mess with them. At the young ladies, they got their They're independent, they're grown up, physically they're grown up, whatever, they're 18 or whatever age, people have the ability to go off and do whatever they want to do. But then, inevitably, young ladies get like accosted by men semi-regularly. Raise your hand if you're a girl and you've ever been accosted by a man. Never?
I don't know what accosted means.
A guy approaches you and tries to chat you up.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like in an unwanted way. You? No? You also? Yeah. Everybody. The two people who didn't raise their hand, I noticed. And it turns out they just didn't understand me. Raise your hand if you're a man and you've been accosted by a woman. Really? All right, that one's out the window. I mean, some guys didn't raise their hands. I'll just put it this way. We'll do it another way. I'm sorry, I didn't ask the question properly. I got to reframe. Sorry, give me a do-over. Continue playing. Don't leave the studio just yet. Raise your hand if you're a woman and you've ever been hit on by a man in a way that made you feel uncomfortable and afraid. All the women raise their hand again. Raise your hand if you're a man and you've ever been hit on a woman in a way that made you feel afraid. There it is. So when I teach young ladies how to say no to men who are giving them attention they don't want, you can really humiliate a guy relatively easily. There's a couple like quick kills. Like they're like master serve. You like spike the ball from the serve and there's no recovery. Problem is if you quick kill a guy and really humiliate him, what's he liable to do? He's liable to assault you just to deal with some of his humiliation. You follow? So you got to kind of half kill him. You got to make sure he knows there's no play and leave you alone, but not be so cruel to him that you run the risk of getting someone who's going to get violent with you just to get back their manhood. You follow this? It's crazy, right? I don't know how I got into that. It was a full tangent. Originally there was some purpose, but anger. Anger is when your lust doesn't get fulfilled, when your greed doesn't get fulfilled. There's several ways it happens. One way it happens, you don't get the thing you want in the first place. You don't get the car, the house, you don't get the girl, and you get angry about it, and bad things come out of that. Bad things come out of anger. It's really lust and greed transformed. It's the mature fruit of lust and greed. The other option is you get what you want, but it sucks. And now you're angry that you paid all this money for this thing and it didn't. You took the girl out and she ended up being a jerk to you, or you paid all this money for this new car and nobody told you you have a nice car. You follow? And then the other one is you get it, it was good. It lived up to the expectations, but you're in the material world, so it's temporary and eventually goes away, and now you're angry about that. Bitter old people. Their body stopped working on them. I mean, you want to talk like we're getting like bitterness, like really nasty anger and resentment. Talk to old people whose bodies are disintegrating on them while they still occupy. Their body's getting gradually repossessed by material nature while they're still occupying. It's like your house getting torn down while you're still living in it. You're just reduced to living in like one room of your house. You follow? Lust, anger, and greed are gates to hell today. You don't have to wait till the end of your life to experience it. There's good reasons to give these things up, independent of some kind of conception of an afterlife. I didn't want to talk about any of that today. What I want to talk about was envy. Raise your hand if you regularly feel envious. See, you guys are catching on. Anyone who didn't raise their hand is lying, either to me or to yourself. Schopenhauer says envy is the emotion everyone experiences, but no one will admit to. Envy literally means to see into somebody, to see into something, like giving someone the evil eye. En for in, and vid, like video, for seeing. Invidia is the Latin. And that's the verbal root vid from Sanskrit, which means to know, which is where we get the word Veda from. But then to know something is to see it, and then to see it became this like giving this thing the evil eye. Sometimes envy is described as like in Dante's Inferno, envy is described as people representing envy they're blinded, and their eyes are covered with lead, and they can't see. So sometimes it's like blind with envy, because it blinds you. But then the literal etymology of the term is to like look at somebody with that evil eye, with that eye that you want what they have. Envy and jealousy are distinct in, like in educated circles, they make a distinction. Jealousy is when someone interrupts your relationship with somebody, and some of the attention that person gives to you is given to that other person. And that feeling of animus and anger you have towards that person, that's jealousy. And then envy is the feeling of you see somebody else and they possess either something or some skill or attribute, and you want that thing for yourself. They're again very similar to lust and greed, whereas jealousy is envy in a relationship, whereas somebody has what belongs to you in a relationship, and that's called jealousy. But then envy is when somebody has something that you want. So just like greed is that desire for things, envy is that animus towards somebody, that negativity towards somebody who has something you want. Sometimes people distinguish between different forms of envy. Positive envy, which motivates you to get up off your butt, and negative envy, which motivates you to tear the other person down. But I think that envy is a really important intermediate transitory emotion that you can take ownership of, and you can turn a bad thing into a good thing. And so rather than throwing it out like the baby with the bathwater, of course, we also don't throw out lust. Have a family, get married, have a sense of duty about it. Ethical non-monogamy is kind of like all the rage these days. ENM, you guys heard of that? ENM, ethical non-monogamy. Essentially means that people have sex with other people, therefore they're polyamorous, but they're honest about it. And they have some principle behind it, Maybe it's like a triangle, there's a V, there's like you got two partners, or maybe there's a quad, there's like four of you who are in a relationship together. Like there's different models, but you have some sort of a principle. You've decided, here's how I'm going to be polyamorous. Essentially have sex with multiple people, and I'm going to tell everybody about it, and therefore it means I have more integrity than the person who lies and cheats. I actually agree with that. It does represent more integrity than just doing it and lying about it. I think an even further level of integrity is where your sense of duty and responsibility and depth makes you form a relationship with somebody which is where sex is a secondary feature. And commitment. And putting in the time with that person and satisfying yourself with that person becomes your value that you live up to. That yields a much more deep and profound and transformative relationship. And it involves some austerity. So lust can be bridled, it can be yoked, it can be brought under control when you have a sense of duty and integrity and honor and commitment that governs your exploration of lust. Like, I know many people who wait till they get married to have sex. Adults. Myself included. People in this room. Adults. Who just decided, you know what, we're just going to wait till we get married and make it special. That's crazy. Who does that? That's bridled lust, controlled lust. I got another principle I live by. It's higher than my lust. Lust is there, but it's like, it's just not, I'm not going to let it run rampant. Greed's the same way. I'm not willing to do anything to turn a buck. I got principles. I'll go out there, I'll hustle, but I'm not going to do anything. It's not worth it. I'd rather be poor and be able to sleep at night. They say money is the root of all evil. Poverty is also the root of all evil. You got to get that sweet spot. My children starving, I'd probably rob most of you guys. You know what I mean? You make it bad enough, you make it ugly enough, it's like, like you start to bring out the worst in people. But provided you can, just in the humblest of ways, by working yourself to the bone, provide the minimum necessities for you and your loved one, that should be enough. You shouldn't be willing to just give up your value system to turn a buck. So lust and greed and anger, anger can be used surgically. The real danger of anger is violence. And provided you only use violence in a self-defense situation, in defense of the innocent, in defense of the weak and the infirm, then you're using anger in a righteous way. In a way that won't degrade you. In fact, anyway, so all these emotions have a way to rescue them. I think one of the ones which doesn't get enough attention is envy. When's the last time you said to somebody, I'm envious of this person? When's the time you admitted yourself, I'm envious of this person? How often do you tell yourself? How often in your own thoughts? Just to yourself, not even to others. Just to yourself. How often do you admit, I'm envious of this individual? It's rare, isn't it? Then how often you tell somebody else, oh, that guy, I'm envious of him, yeah. Because to admit that you're envious is to admit that they're fundamentally better than you. It's such a heavy cross to bear. It takes so much fortitude, honestly, and depth, and self-acceptance and self-love. But by the time you have that, you won't even be experiencing the envy. You'll be too deep. You follow? But yeah, I think feelings like resentment and envy and remorse, these emotions are less talked about than lust, anger, and greed. And they're a really amazing opportunity for us to take emotions which are not necessarily negative and turn them around. Of course, I've got like 3 minutes left. So I'm going to start to make my points quickly. Envy is when you see somebody else and they have something that you want and it makes you feel insufficient. And what you can do with that is you can start to look at what you value and where the thing you're envious of is actually worth pursuing. And if it is worth pursuing, you can go ahead and acknowledge humbly that that person's further along you can learn from them. And you can turn this into a positive thing where through a process of osmosis, by appreciating the other person for the quality they have and not thinking in this scarcity mentality where they have it means I can't have it, but appreciate that you can actually find what you're looking for in a healthy way. It doesn't involve taking it from them. And that their existence is not an insult or an offense to you. And you can just see other people and appreciate them and see like, wow, they're doing something amazing. And then let that fuel you to strive forward in your life. That's a way to take envy and use it as a motivator to help drive you forward without focusing on that person and they've done this to me and their success equals my failure. That's healthy. Additionally, you can go a little deeper. You can think, do I really want that person's life? Because you can't separate what a person has from what they did to get it and what they went through to get it. You can't separate a person's life from what they've been through. Do you really want to trade in yourself for somebody else? The answer is always going to be no, if you think about it deeply enough. And that'll help you have a newfound appreciation that I want to be me. I might want to improve my life, but I can't just envy somebody else because I don't want what they have. I want my version of success. With my thought process, with my mind, with my values, with the good things I have in my own life. I don't want to give those things up. And so by engaging with envy in a positive way, you can go to a much deeper place in your own life. A place of gratitude, a place of self-acceptance, and a place of forward progress. And appreciation for others. Similarly with resentment. You can understand that this person's wronged me in a way, but I want them to make amends. And instead of just resenting them blindly with no possibility of reconciliation, you can let that person know, here's how you stepped wrong. And you've got an opportunity here to make things right with me. And then if they don't make things right, you can let them go. And learn the lost art and science of detachment. And how to let go. Without just letting bitterness take over and become its own self-serving reality. And with remorse, which breaks most people because they already struggle with so much shame and guilt in their life anyway, you can understand remorse has incredible value in that when a good person does something which is not good, they should feel remorse. And it reminds you, hey, I'm better than this. I'm better than this, I got to rise up. And you can let that remorse be curative and therapeutic, because when you feel remorse properly, you'll never make the same mistake again. If you could dip into these powerful emotions and transform them into something powerful and empowering for you and motivating for you, therapeutic doses of remorse will inoculate you against ever making the same mistake again. And people can trust you because they can see that you're never forgetting means they can let go and forget. And they can forgive. Because you feel bad about what you did and you're holding that cross. They don't have to worry about it anymore. You'll never make that mistake. They can see it. It's not selfish. You're willing to hold on to that for the rest of your life. To remember what you did wrong so you never make that mistake again. So you can stay frosty and sharp on it. And everybody else can relax. Instead of you're ultimately an ease lover who just wants to forget all their mistakes, have everybody give you a pass, and just forget about it like it never happened, and bury it. And resentment can be a placeholder to give the person an opportunity to make amends. That ultimately leads to you learning a lesson about why you put this person in a position that they didn't deserve in the first place. If they don't make amends. If they do make amends, then it teaches you the lost art of forgiveness and reconciliation, which is also an incredibly valuable skill for us to learn. And then back again to envy. It deepens you. You start to question, what do I value? It takes you to a deeper place, a more profound, thoughtful place, as you get rid of just very, very surface level envy that you suffer from, that usually just kind of festers because you never bothered to shine some light on it. When you shine some light on it, it quickly evaporates and dissipates like the fog, and you remember who you are. Or it motivates you to get up, or it motivates you to appreciate other people. And it motivates you to appreciate yourself. Because you realize, I might want the thing they got, or I might want something similar to that, but I don't want to give up who I am. And I got my own journey. I got to get that my own way. In this way, these emotions, envy, and remorse, and resentment, and there's probably some others too, I don't think that they get enough attention. People aren't trained to acknowledge them to themselves, and they're not trained to acknowledge them to other people. And it cuts us off from an incredible opportunity to grow. It's just like an extension of this idea. There's the gates to hell don't go through them. But these, especially the ones I'm talking about, they become these tools that can either heal or they can destroy. And if you learn to work with them properly, it's like working with fire. My wife, it's not horrific, but my wife cooked every day. My wife has cooked every day for 25 years. In a given year, my wife won't cook for me maybe 1 or 2 days. And we've been married 25 years. So she's cooked for me 2, 3, 4 times a day for 25 straight years. You can add that up. I don't know what that is. I think it's, 365 times 25 is 7,500 times 3.5, about 25,000 meals she's cooked for me. But she also cooked at the temple every day for 10 straight years, 7 days a week. So that's another, 7,000 meals on top of that. And a lot of those meals, at least 500 to 1,000 of them were for 200 to 500 people. So it wasn't just all small quantities. She did some big quantity cooking. She's got scars all over her arms because she's working with fire. And you work with fire in a serious kitchen, you get burned. There's no way around it. And it's not always first-degree burns. You get some second-degree burns. We've avoided third-degree burns, but you get second-degree burns, and you get a lot of them. So she's not scarred up like she's a cutter or something like that, but you can see it if you look closely. Here and also here, both places. Never going to be looking at my wife's forearms from now on. But you get fire. You learn to work with fire. You can do amazing stuff. And there's a little bit of risk. It's powerful. But if you can work with it, you can do amazing stuff. We need to learn to get in the kitchen of life with these emotions and work with them. It's like working with fire. We need to learn how to own our envy. We need to learn how to own our resentment. We need to learn how to own our remorse. And if you can dip into these very powerful, universal emotions that every single person on planet Earth experiences on a regular basis, and if you don't, you're lobotomized. Or you're in denial. If you can learn to work with these emotions that exist anyway. I'm just saying we need to learn how to give a name to them and flesh them out and work with them and grapple with them. Then you can turn them into an incredibly powerful tool that will move you forward in your life and will inspire you and will deepen you and chasten you and broaden your horizons. Thank you, IGTV. All right, I'm done. Give me some feedback, guys.